Hello, and welcome to this new edition of Beyond the Board. So I am Pikastroff, and I'm gonna be your host for this edition, and I am accompanied here by APerson13.
Hello.
So, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do in the speedrunning community and in bingos?
Alright, so as you said, I'm APerson13. I sort of started off in speedrunning with speedrunning Terraria, and if you remember Bingothon Summer 2020, I ran a Terraria pre-hard mode bingo there. And so since then I've sort of moved on from Terraria and still semi-active in their community, but I've moved on to the Pikmin speedrunning community. More so for Pikmin 3, I don't do so much speed running necessarily as most people. I focus more on glitch hunting and also hacking to a point. So like I'm sort of our guy for looking into the game files and finding stuff that we need to go fast. My main focus is Pikmin 3 because it's probably the least documented from a speedrunning perspective. I have also done runs of Pikmin 2, and at some point or another I want to get into Pikmin 1, although Pikmin 1 is a very difficult speedrun. I sort of got into Pikmin 3 speedrunning, so I go into Bingo Sync, and there was a Pikmin 1 bingo and a Pikmin 2 bingo, and there was no Pikmin 3 bingo. And I saw this as sort of an opportunity to sort of make my mark and make my own bingo board for the Pikmin 3 community.
So, when did you actually get started really with that project?
So this is still a very, very young project. I maybe started putting together a list of goals beginning of September or so. Quite a lot of it is just trial and error. Try and make a balancing that works sort of, do a few runs with that board and then adjust it accordingly. And it's also just trying to find a balance of how far out of the way is it to get to a specific goal versus how far is it in the story. Because you can both have routes where you don't necessarily even have to go that far into the story, but have to take quite a few extra days to do extra things to fill up your goals. And then you have other ones where you can just beat the game as fast as possible and maybe kill an extra enemy here or there.
What do you think would be the most interesting aspect of routing, would you say?
So, most people, when they would hear this question, they would probably immediately think of Pikmin counts. How many Pikmin do you need to do this? And it sounds crazy, but in Pikmin 3, Pikmin counts are very lenient because you can kill just about any enemy and suddenly you have 1,000,000 Pikmin. I guess it really just comes down to experience as a whole, knowing if I need to, for example, go to Twilight River and blow up a wall there or something, then I'm going to need to go through the story and kill Sandvouching Meerslug. And from there you can also look, okay, I'm going to Tropical Wilds at this point in the story, can I do anything else there? So it comes down to a lot of game knowledge, a lot of knowing when can I do this, and yeah.
Something you said earlier was that balancing really and creating all these goals for this bingo card all came down to trial and error. So, to you, what would be the criteria that would make you think, okay, this is a good goal, or no, this is a bad goal, let's get rid of it?
So something I have been thinking of trying is just generating a bunch of boards, giving them to the community and asking them which of these rows look viable, which ones look disproportionately better or worse than others. Because otherwise, like, I would be the only one trying to balance this, and I have a very heavy bias towards certain things. There are some very talented runners who have pointed out specific goals that I didn't think would be unbalanced, but apparently they really were. For example, I think there was one goal where you have to collect a certain number of specific data files, and because I just sort of see this, I think, wow, that's a lot of data files of a specific type, because it's a rather broad category. I put that at a very high tier, but then that would make the boards unbalanced then, because if you know where these data files are, you can get them, and there's your tier 23 goal already.
What would you say is like your favorite goal you managed to put in? And alternatively, is there perhaps any goal that you really wanted to put in, but that turns out it didn't work out?
There's a lot of them that I really like. One thing that I think really shows game knowledge well is building all the bridges in the game. How Pikmin 3 works is there's a lot of points in it where the game sort of tries to slow you down by making you build a bridge. And so you need to find the piles of fragments around and use those fragments to build the bridge. So I think knowing how to build all the bridges quickly and in a timely fashion is a very valuable skill. And in terms of one that I really wanted to put in but couldn't really, I actually don't know if we've had any goals like that so far. There was one rather mean goal that involved killing a flying enemy with the minimum possible number of throws. But then there was a lot of math involved in that and very precise throws, so we just had to throw it out and, well, pun intended there.
I was just phrasing there. I was like, oh, should I say it? No. Yeah, and you just threw it and then there we go. What do you think would be the core skill you think that they need to practice on to get better and better at bingos?
So the big one is just knowing what to do at any specific points. There's loads of goals that aren't in any of the main categories. Definitely knowledge in this case over execution or something. Is just recently we're doing a race and I was racing against one guy who is, I would say, one of our best execution heavy players, because he currently holds the record for the first row of the mission bow collect treasures missions. This is J596. And somehow I was able to beat him because we are pretty much both following the same route, but I was able to think, okay, I need to do this now. And despite my horrible execution and bad mistakes, I was still able to beat him.
Considering, as we discussed like all the way earlier, you know, it was quite a massive thing to start off from, and I guess it can seem quite intimidating from the perspective of anyone who would want to get started making their bingo card. I guess the first question would be, is there anything you'd like to say to any of those people who would be interested in creating a bingo card but aren't sure where to even start?
So, to people who want to make their own bingo cards for a game, I would say just go at it. What I did is a system of unsorted and sorted goals. So, all the goals start with no tier at all, and out of those, you can then have people look at them and sort of decide like what tier you want them to be. And what I sort of did is like I have defeating the final boss as a goal, and that is tier 20 out of 25. So using that goal and also growing 100 blue Pikmin, which is tier 15, I used those as sort of a base to gauge roughly where in the tier I would want all the goals. And from there, in terms of brainstorming goals, it's really just looking at the goals you have, how many goals you have in each tier, and attempting to find goals or think of goals that would fit into those tiers.
My second question was, for how long do you think you'll still need until you get to a state of the card where you'll feel like you won't need to do any other major changes until there are any other like major discoveries in Pikmin 3 speedrunning that would warrant a rebalancing?
Okay, so talking in the very long term, in terms of quantity of goals, so at the moment we have 94 sorted goals, and ideally I would at least double that. So we have very varied cards, and we can start adding many more tags to the goals to make sure that you don't get like 2 goals that collect a certain number of fruits, for example. That's on the quantity side. In terms of balancing, the best ideal situation. So a bingo card has 12 possible bingos you can take. The 2 diagonals plus 5 rows and 5 columns. Best case scenario, you would be able to consistently generate cards where each of those is equally viable. But obviously that is very difficult to do.
So how would you define viable for a row or column?
I would just say the best routing you can possibly do, have that number of possible bingos all take the same amount of time.
So, yeah, we're getting to the end now. Is there any final thing you'd like to say as a whole, whether it be about Pikmin 3 speedrunning, bingos, or just about to your community? Anything?
One thing I will just say is Pikmin 3 itself sort of caters itself to speedrunning a lot in general, because the entire basis of the game is routing and planning your days, which is pretty much exactly what you would do in a bingo, randomizer, or even speedrun. But then, despite that, it's still a very not nearly as popular speed game as something like Pikmin 2, or even as popular as some of the platformer games out there, thinking Super Mario 64 or Celeste or stuff. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you like a game and you've been sort of trying speedruns of it by yourself, try and find the community for it. We have this amazing Discord for the full Pikmin series linked on speedrun.com, and we are always open to new people. Don't think that speedrunning is this exclusive thing that only some people can do. Anyone can speedrun if they want to. I sort of challenge you to seek out communities for the games that you enjoy and see if there's speedrunning communities existing for it and what resources there are.
Absolutely. Especially agree with what you're saying about speedrunning is not an exclusive thing, and don't be afraid to try it out. Alright. Well, thank you so much for participating in this Beyond the Board, and to anyone who may have watched or read this Beyond the Board, thank you so much. Make sure to give a follow to APerson13, and you'll have all the links, of course, in the description of the video. So thank you again, and we'll be seeing you on the next one. Thank you.
Alright. Thanks for having me on.